always love it when other people try to define for you what sobriety is. They're usually people who are really judgy, and unfortunately they're also addicts who are probably sober. First time I ever ran into this, I was fresh out of rehab. I was not on maintenance medicines. Went to some meetings and heard people basically being shunned because they were taking maintenance medicines. And I'm like, if they're working, they're taking care of business, paying their bills, rebuilding their relationships with their loved ones, who cares? They're not out here on the street. They're not doing bad things. They're not getting high. They're not doing any of the bad things they used to do. Leave them alone. It really bothered me, to hear people being shunned because, they were kind of being discouraged. And I'm like, we're supposed to be here encouraging each other. And if somebody didn't get sober the same way you did, that's fine. We've all got our own path that we've got to walk. That particular time, I hadn't been on maintenance meds, but then I relapsed. Surprise, surprise. And I did end up on maintenance medicines, and that's okay. And I wasn't ashamed of it. And I don't think anybody should be, If somebody's on maintenance medicines, well, good for them. Are they working? Are they paying their bills? Are they rebuilding their relationships with the people that they love? Are they? Do they have a dream? Do they have have they reinvented themselves into a better person? Then leave them alone. And some people may be on maintenance meds their entire life, and that's okay too. Yeah, it really is okay. Because, like I said, they're not out chasing drugs anymore. They're not getting into trouble. They're doing all the right things, So, I say leave them alone. The only time I'm really concerned, though, about people on maintenance meds, if they are self-medicating, if they're buying them off the street, that's never really good because, I would do that, I would, before heroin, there was there was pills, and I would do pills for a little bit, and then, maybe I would run out, and kind of have to fall back on Suboxone. But, Suboxone is a miracle. It's saved so many lives, and it's gotten so many relationships, rebuilt or restarted or, or repaired, however you want to word it. And, but if you don't do it the right way, if you don't do it, take them correctly, take them consistently, don't use it just as a fallback. If you don't, that's when it gets dangerous. And it's very dangerous in a way that, because you may use it as a fallback for a week or two or whatever. And then when you do revert back to your drug of choice, it can cause you to overdose, and very badly. Not to mention the havoc that it wreaks on your body, just going back and forth and back and forth. And I'm sure that anybody here is listening has been through this. I remember hearing about Subutex. Well, that's what they give pregnant ladies. It doesn't have the blocker in it. Okay, so I got a hold of one time. Those little white pills with the quarter moon on one side, whatever. And people swore to me, you can do this with dope because it doesn't have the blocker in it, so therefore it doesn't make you sick. Oh, cool. So what I do, put it in a spoon, crushed it up, and did it. Well, at first I didn't feel anything. I'm like, this isn't doing anything. And then after, it's a pretty good amount of time, but I wouldn't say 5 minutes, but it was still a pretty good amount of time. Finally I started feeling something, like, oh, wait, okay, I'm starting to feel it now, it's starting to come on. All right. Well, then it got really, really intense. Next thing I know, I'm in precipitated withdrawals. Something fierce. It was all unbelievable. It was in the middle of the summer, or at least it was warm, and I remember going outside just to kind of walk up and down the street just to try to get myself together because I was shaking uncontrollably. It was really, really bad, And I'm sure that most anybody listening to this has experienced it, or at least seen someone experience it. And the worst part is whenever you think, oh, it's fine. Yeah, I just did some dope an hour ago, but it's fine because everybody says that this one doesn't do that. Well, they all do that. They all will make you sick if not taken correctly. That's why it's important to go to a doctor. Besides, get your own script. Most people listen to this have some form of insurance, be it from work or from the government, and it doesn't cost that much. You know, just make sure you're doing it correctly. You know, and I always tell people, don't harp on people because of the way they've gotten sober. You know, and then the worst is whenever people say, oh, if you're using maintenance meds, you're not really sober. That's not for you to decide, man. You know, it's not for me to decide either. If someone's getting, taking care of business, like I say, and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, who am I to say what sobriety is for that person? But getting back to the precipitated withdrawals things for a moment, yeah, that stuff is real, and if you still have drugs in your system, and then you take something with with the opioid blocker in it, it's going to go into your brain. It's going to kick all the drugs off of your receptors, and your receptors are going to freak out. That's why you go into withdrawals instantly rather than gradually, which, I mean, it's awful no matter what. I mean, withdrawals are withdrawals, and, detox, whatever. That's why, like, if you go into a detox center, not a rehab, just a like a 4 or 5 day detox center. That's why they always want you to come in sick, because that way they can start you on some kind of maintenance med, but usually an instant taper too, which is, it's fine. It's a short term thing. It's to get you through the withdrawal, or through the detox. Hence, detox center. Anyway, but that's why they always want you to be, in full on withdrawal by the time you get there, because they want you to be ready to start maintenance medicines. But it's bad enough, being judged while you're in active addiction, from people who aren't, maybe it's your family, maybe it's, whoever it is. It's usually family. And it's not necessarily that they're being judgy, it's just that they're probably sick and tired of your shit. And you really can't blame them. Even when I was at my worst, I knew that, I was putting my family through hell. And actually, that's why I stayed away, because I didn't want to put them through any more hell than they were already going through over me. But so let's say, you go through all that, and you deal with that for years, and of course you try to kick the habit on your own, and that never works out. And then maybe you start trying to self-medicate, whatever. That never works out. It never works out. You need professional help, and that's just how it is. When someone finally gets serious about getting sober, they got to get some help, So if you know anybody that's still in active addiction, they've got to get help. That's just it. I mean, and I fought that whole concept for years. I mean, I really did. I fought it. I was like, I don't need to go to no clinic. I don't need to go to any rehab or whatever. I can beat this. Well, I was very sorely mistaken. To the point where I did quit once. Okay, I went to a detox. Then I crashed out at my sister's for a couple of months. Well, anxiety was ungodly, and I just could not get past. I mean, obviously I was past the detox, but, and but I just could not get it back. I mean, I had no strength. I mean, just to walk up the stairs to go take a shower was work. I mean, it's like you need a nap just after going up some stairs. And this is a couple of months after the fact. But anyway, I was dealing with some very bad anxiety. And I was going to talk to a therapist. And how this place worked is you would talk to a therapist for a while, and they would evaluate you and stuff. And if they felt like you needed, more help that they weren't able to, in other words, like psychiatric meds or whatever, they would then refer you up to a psychiatrist. Well, this therapist that I was talking with, I liked her a whole lot. She was super cool. We could talk about music. She liked a lot of the same bands that I liked. For example, I had recently went to a concert, and we were able to talk about it. Anyway, actually, it wasn't recently a concert. It was a concert that I'd went to in the past. But anyway, she was super cool. Anyway, well, it was getting time to where she was going to either refer me up or something. And she said, well, I can refer you up to a psychiatrist because I do believe that you could probably use psychiatric meds. And I knew what that meant, and I didn't really know how to feel about it. I'm like, well, maybe I do need them. But, of course, I always used to abuse them with opioids, too, So I was really kind of torn there. But then she kind of threw me for a loop. She was like, well, I can do that, but what I'd really rather see you do is go to a Suboxone clinic. I'm like, oh, what? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about, lady? I've been, at this point, I've been clean for a couple of months, I'm not entirely, I can't remember exactly. Say 8 to 12 weeks, I'm like, what do you mean? I've got this, I'm pretty good, I'm still struggling with the, with the whole after effects as far as being very weak and tired all the time and, no strength, but I'm, I've got some clean time now, she's like, yeah, but, with your history, you always relapse, and I'm concerned about you relapsing more than I am concerned about anything else. So I'd really like to see you go to a Suboxone clinic. And I was offended. I was genuinely pissed off, and I left there that day, and I was like, screw them. I wasn't going to go back. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to a Suboxone clinic. I'm not going to do meds. I got through it. I did do a little Suboxone at the detox, but after I left there, I was, no more. And then I've got this lady suggesting that I should go do that way after the fact. So I got home and I thought about it, I was seeing her every week, and by the time my next appointment rolled around, I'd finally humbled myself and finally got over myself and realized, she's right. Because one thing I've realized is I know how to get clean, I know how to get sober. But the problem is I don't know how to stay sober. And that's always a problem for people, I guess, is they don't know how to stay sober. So finally I humbled myself and said, okay, fine, maybe you're right. I'll go to this clinic and I'll talk to him. So I went and I talked to him. I said, isn't it kind of odd that, I've already been clean for a couple months? And he was like, well, most people who come here are fresh off of dope. But no, it's not completely unheard of for you to want to do that. So I did the maintenance meds. I did the Suboxone. And I got to tell you, it was probably the best decision I ever made. I now have over 5 years clean time. Actually, I'm in about 5.5 years at this point. And that's great. So I think that and I kind of waited until I hit the 5-year mark to where I started, doing things like this podcast. And it is a labor of love, but I did have to make sure that I was in the clear, so to speak. I don't know. We never want to completely let our guards down, of course, because if we ever let our guard. Someone once asked me, they had a friend who'd been who was an addict and had been clean for like 14 years or something like that, and was like, and then relapsed, and it was like, how did this happen? How did this person, doing so good or whatever. And how do they relapse? I said, well, he let his guard down. I mean, he got to thinking that, hey, I'm good. I got it licked. Kind of like the whole attitude. I was an addict. No, I'm not. So, no, you're still an addict. And that's why he relapsed, because he let his guard down. He thought that he was good. He thought, I can do it on the weekend. No big deal. So anyway, with regards to that, I had to make sure that I had enough clean time in. And 5 years was kind of my mark that I was like, yeah, once I hit that, I think I can start, doing things. So here I am. And as a community, I feel like we need to encourage people to, get sober however it is. If they can go to a detox and then go to rehab for, however long and come out and not need any maintenance meds, that's great. That's fantastic. If somebody feels like they need Suboxone, if somebody else feels like they need methadone, whatever the case may be, I say, well, let's not discourage it. If they become a law-abiding citizen, if they rebuild their relationships, if they start taking care of business and paying bills and doing things with their kids again, or whatever it is, or just let's say it's an artist, but they just didn't have time or money to pursue their pursue their craft anymore, because they were too busy chasing. Now they've got time and money for that again. That's great. Let's not get too wrapped up in the details of how they got sober. It's one of the things that really irritates me about some people. They get so self-righteous, I guess, and I get, and at the same time I try to look at them, I guess maybe they mean well. They're like, well, you're still dependent on something. I'm like, a lot of people are dependent on a lot of things. Doesn't mean that, we don't get hard on people we're hard on people who are dependent on, I don't know, blood pressure meds to keep their blood pressure down when probably they could lose some weight, or whatever. That's not always the case. I'm aware. I'm just using that as an example here. So, anyway, getting to other things. I've always been big on writing, even if it's just keeping a journal of very mundane, boring things, And I've always kind of been a fan of memoirs, and I can recommend one with regards to drug addiction and things like that. The singer, the original singer, the only real singer of the Stone Temple Pilots, Scott Weiland, he wrote a memoir called Not Dead and Not for Sale, and he's one of the more infamous heroin addicts of our time. And his wife, Mary Forsberg, also wrote one called Fall to Pieces. Both of them are really good. If you're looking for something to read that is, kind of somebody that you can relate with, as far as the struggle, that's something I can recommend. And I've been writing a memoir myself because I follow Jerry Jenkins. He's an author, and he writes a lot of Christian books, and I haven't read a single one of his books, but I do follow him, his little tutorials and stuff as far as writing is concerned. And like one of the things that he said is, to write a biography, an autobiography or whatever, yeah, you'd have to be famous. You have to be somebody that people want to read about, people know about. Because biographical stuff is usually from birth until death, if it's biography, or autobiography is birth until now at this point, as I finish writing this book, whatever. But a memoir can be from anybody, so it can be about a particular period of your life. So I began writing a memoir And it was about the time, my time in active addiction. Another thing about a memoir is you do not have to follow any particular timeline. You can skip around. You can start out at the beginning of the book, towards the end of the story, or maybe in the middle, and then that could be your first chapter, and then you can skip back and say, okay, how this began was blah blah blah, and then tell various stories from during that time, and then obviously wrap it up with, how did I get clean? What ultimately, after all the drugs, and after all the relapses, and after all the going to jail 6 different times, and going to rehab, and all that good stuff, what finally got me to this point where I'm clean, I'm sober, and I'm actually sitting down to write it all out and tell my tale, and hopefully somebody can read it and maybe help them out a little bit, getting through a tough spot. Sometimes people just want somebody they can relate with, or that they feel that relates with them. So I recommend people always write. Write. You don't have to write a memoir. You can write whatever you want. Just write, because you get little strokes of brilliance. You get little flashes that come through, and you're like, wow, that was really good. And maybe you could put it on a blog. I know of a few blogs that would love to have some people that would, contribute some. I mean, it has to be quality, of course. That's why I'm not on there. No, I'm kidding. So a question that, they ask in counseling is, does your spirituality, support your sobriety, And, I mean, sometimes that question can be complicated, or I'm sorry, the answer can be complicated. Because I guess it depends upon how you look at things. But, kind of like I talk a lot about law of attraction. And that, whatever you become, or whatever you choose to be, you will be. Like Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, you must think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Everything vibrates. And here's an amazing little fact. Okay, atoms are like 99.999% hollow. Now, if you, and this is something that just blows my mind, if you were to take every one of the 7 billion or whatever it is people on the planet, and take all the empty space out of their atoms, out of all the trillions of atoms that makes up a person, take all the empty space out of the atoms, and basically just cram them down into a solid mass where there's no empty space in between the electrons and all that good stuff. You could fit all 7 billion people on the planet in like a coffee cup, or something that small, something that you can hold in your hand. And that's amazing. But what it also means is that we do vibrate. That's what makes a atom of oak, wood, or steel, or a diamond, or concrete, or cotton ball, is just in how the atoms are vibrating. That's what determines what they are. So, whenever you're happy, you kind of feel a little buzzy, So, with regards to spirituality, I do believe in vibration. I do believe Nikola Tesla was correct. So, therefore, how your spirituality applies to your sobriety is if you bring yourself into the resonance of, I am sober, then you will be sober. If you bring your resonance into I am a podcaster, then that's what you're going to be. And that's what how it goes for everybody. So how that relates to spirituality is, I think it just depends. I mean, does God want you to be sober? Sure, I don't think God wants you to be a slave to anything. But at the same time, ultimately, you can call it God, you can call it the universe, you can call it whatever you want. But ultimately, we have free will. So I'm not saying that God doesn't care, but I am saying that God basically leaves it up to us, because we do have free will. So knowing that we have free will, if we choose to not be sober, well, then that's what it's going to be, and that's us practicing our free will. So that's why I say, when they ask if your spirituality supports sobriety, yeah, mine does, but doesn't necessarily mean that it always does. It just supports whatever you choose to be. You choose to be sober, then you're going to be sober, as long as you get yourself in that resonance with that. And I'm not trying to get all woo-woo on people and all that with spirituality, but there is a lot more to it. There's so much that we don't know. And I do believe in a lot of spirituality, but I also believe it can be backed up with science. Another Nikola Tesla quote is, when science begins studying non-physical phenomena, it'll make more progress in a decade than it's made in all the centuries previous. And I believe that's true, because there's so much, in the quantum realm or whatever, that we just don't know. And there's so much to learn. And a lot of it is going to come down to vibration. And why do some people get sick and other people don't? Why do some people get this and other people don't? Why does anything happen? Because they get in harmony with that reality. That's what you want to call it. So that's why I always tell people, when we shift our personalities, when we shift our identity, let's turn it into something awesome. So, anywho, I've got some pretty good things coming up, and I appreciate you listening. My name is Matt Stevens. This is my sober addiction.